Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On this Friday, that music means it's the last broadcast hour of the week. I mean, Dr. Larry Arnn is usually in the house, and he is today for the Hillsdale Dialogues. All things Hillsdale can be found at hillsdale.edu. All of our prior dialogues can be found at Hugh for Hillsdale. We are taking a break this week from our series on Winston Churchill's memoirs of World War II, to which we will return next week. But as we head into Labor Day, we want to do a little current events checkup. I do want to remind everyone our special Labor Day show is our annual 3-hour extravaganza with Dr. Arnn, Professor Thomas West, and others about the American labor movement so that you actually understand what we are celebrating. It kept us from going red. Dr. Arnn, how are you this Friday?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I am much better than I was yesterday because I'm starting to get over the grief for the kids in Minneapolis, but we'll talk about that a little bit. I thought we should begin, though, with the biggest event that has happened since you and I last talked, current event, which is President Trump's effort to end the Ukraine war, including a summit in Alaska, a summit in the United States. And then yesterday, just when I thought maybe Putin was acting normal, he unleashes the deadliest attack on Kyiv since the summit. I believe it killed 19 people at least. It wounded another 48. It hit the EU building. What do you think of this? What do you think of Putin and of President Trump's effort to get him to be a reasonable actor on the world stage?
Well, it's a mess, isn't it?
Yeah.
I confess that I thought that Trump was exaggerating, which he does, when he said he'd end it in one day, because he'll end it when it's in the interest of Vladimir Putin to end it. And so he has tried, and it's skillful, by the way. He's really good, in my opinion. He's a big deal maker, right? So he's sending them more weapons, and he's getting the Europeans to help pay for it. And all in all, the front against Putin is stronger. But Putin's in a strong position, too. He's got a much bigger country. He's ruthless. It's a country that has the habit of standing by its leaders in a crisis. They put up with more despotism than they ought to. And so it's going to be hard to fix. Trump is doing the right thing, I think, which is seeking peace and pushing back both. And if anything will work, that'll work. And, you know, it's hardball. It's war, right? So, of course, Putin is extracting the maximum advantage he can get through arms. And that'll go on until it doesn't go on anymore. I've thought for a long time myself, but what do I know? I thought there would be a deal when the parts of Ukraine that are most Russian, which most or all of which Russia occupies right now, end up becoming Russian. And, you know, that's sort of the outlines of the deal that exists right now. But it's going to be hard to fix, and it has to do partly with what Putin conceives to be his interest. And, you know, there is a line of thought that says that Russia is weakening all the time, and soon he has to make a deal. And there's a line of thought that's also in the weakness line of thought that he can't make a deal because he spent so much on this, and the casualties are very high, including Russian casualties, that he has to get some big win. Can't afford because he'll look weaker. And I confess I don't know the truth of that. I don't think the truth of that is known, in part because it lives inside the man, Vladimir Putin.
And it's a very, what did Churchill say about Russia generally? An enigma wrapped inside a mystery, wrapped inside a riddle, or some sequence of those three things. I believe. Go ahead.
But I think there is a key, the Russian national interest. And Russia, you know, I think the Biden administration, I think a succession of American administrations have not taken Russia seriously enough. Biden suggested at one point and then retracted it that regime change was needed there. Well, the Russian regime is an old, strong thing. All you got to do is look at their war record in the Second World War and the First World War to see that. And so it's very stubborn, right? And so it's strong, and it's weaker than it used to be, or is it? Because it's more Russian than it used to be, and the Soviet Empire under the administrations of Stalin governed all kinds of people that don't want to be governed by it, including many in present-day Ukraine. And that doesn't make a nation stronger. Over time, it makes them weaker, and the Soviet Union collapsed. So one would also hope that Putin would be an intelligent Russian nationalist. And increasingly, I doubt that he is. Because
now, earlier this week, President Trump said he is, I'm paraphrasing, he's not happy with anything involving Russia, Ukraine, and that if things don't change in about 2 weeks, we'll know what that means. I interpreted that to mean he will allow Ukraine to use weapons manufactured in the United States, paid for by the EU and given to Ukraine, to be deployed to their utmost ability. Is that how you understood it?
Well, I don't think Trump wants us to understand clearly, or Putin. I think he wants him to be afraid. And so it might mean that. That's obviously something that could happen. And see, one thing that's, what's going on in the world, we're starting school this week, and we have a student from India. I just had lunch with a bunch of students, and she was one of them. And, there's a lot of friction between us and India, and we should be friends with India. And Trump's put tariffs on them, right? Well, why did he do that? Because they get oil from Russia, and they've been close to Russia since independence in 1948. And Pakistan, with whom they have deep animosity, split off from India. They've been close to China. One reads that India is getting close to China. There's big chips being played all over the world, and most of the world is in Asia, Eurasia, Asia proper too. So how's it going to play out? Well, if Putin would look at the world the way I suggest, and what do I know? Again, I don't live in Russia, but he's got an enormous land, and many of the resources are to the east, where few Russians live. And that part of the world is close to China. China is an expanding power. And so, somehow, first of all, I think the trouble is coming between Russia and China. No matter what else happens, that's going to happen. It's already emerging in some ways. And so maybe we should be thinking about, and Putin should be thinking about the opportunity for that, right?
Yeah, can I pause on India for a moment? Because I know why we dropped those tariffs on them, but it is, China has a demographic crisis, and they've got an economic malaise problem and the latter will be exacerbated by the former. India has neither of those things, but they do have a deep ethnic problem because of the Pakistan-Indian hostility. I think the United States ought to be squarely with India, but I don't think that precludes the tax on Russian oil that is refined in India. Do you?
Well, I was on the phone this morning with a friend of mine in India, and we talked about that because the tariffs are really smarting people there, and they hate them, right? And they think of America as a friend, and now this has happened. And I said, yeah, remember, there's these enormous adjustments going on in the world, and we have $38 trillion in debt, and we have operated in a trade regime for decades now in which the average nation has heavier tariffs on us than we have on anybody. And we thought of ourselves as the one big power, especially after the Soviet Union fell, and we thought we could afford it and it will spread democracy. Has it spread democracy in China? And India was already a democracy. So the terms of trade, Trump is adjusting them. And it looks to me like, because whatever else you think about Donald Trump, and I happen mostly to admire him, he's a deal maker, right? And tariffs are an old tradition in America. And they're not, in pure economic theory, there's no doubt that they're a bad idea, right? But we don't live under a regime of pure economic theory. We live in a regime where we have to live, right? And like I used to argue with the great Milton Friedman he was a very great man and a friend of mine for a long time, and I just adored him. And he would say, yeah, pure economic freedom, no doubt free trade is the only way to go. And I'd say, yeah, and let's extend that. I'd say, let's get the Soviet Union to make our weapons. Because, they seem to be good at it, right?
And there is the limit. There is there is the reality that we do not live.
Right? And I said, that's a mouthful, too, because the factors of production and manufacturing that underpin the defense industry go very far. You're going to have some tariffs.
Stand by. I will be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn, our end of the week look back at a couple of months' worth of current events. Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue will roll on. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Stay tuned.
This show is a part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to your favorite. You'll get brand new episodes of all your favorite shows sent right to your device, and you'll help us know that you're out there listening. Never miss another episode by going to podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. Or click the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.
Welcome back, America, and I hope you are getting ready for a great Labor Day weekend, a long weekend. On Monday, the Hillsdale Dialogue special that I conducted many years ago on American labor movement, the actual history with Dr. Arnn and Thomas West and a couple other people, will be on for the 3 hours of the program. I hope you don't miss it because it's really what Labor Day ought to be about, and it's not a bunch of slogans. It's actually the history of the American labor movement and how it kept us out of sort of Leninist and Marxist labor movements, and I'm very grateful for that show. Every year people say, wow, that's great. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest for this Hillsdale Dialogue. We are pausing for 1 week only our deep dive into Winston Churchill's World War II memoirs to look at some events of the past 2.5 months when Dr. Arnn and I have not been looking too closely at what's going on in the world as we focus on what preceded World War II in the eyes of Winston Churchill. And the first 3 episodes of that series are available at hughforhillsdale.com or at hillsdale.edu, all things Hillsdale. Dr. Arnn, Israel has struck at Syria a couple of times in the last 2 months. The UN is ending the United Nations effort in Lebanon in a year. The IDF troops are poised to take Gaza City and hunt down relentlessly Hamas in Gaza City. And yesterday, in fact, they uncovered and destroyed a kilometer-long tunnel in southern Gaza. So it's a lot of work to destroy 500 miles of tunnel. How do you think Israel is doing, and what do you make of the reaction on the world stage with which they're being met?
Well, they're doing an incredibly difficult thing. The whole idea of Israel is an incredibly difficult thing, and they've probably done it better than anybody ever did. I know one criticism of the way they do it from Eric Prince, who's wise in the ways of war, a very interesting guy. And I don't know if he's right or not, but I'll repeat it because it's interesting. He says that he took some Texas oil men over to Israel and said, look, you can drill horizontally and flood those tunnels with seawater. and then that forces everybody up, and then you don't have to go in the tunnels. And they didn't do that. They did it the way they did it, which they did do it, by the way, with an amazingly small number of casualties and extremely skillfully, right? And his comment to me on a podcast was, well, they're smarter than anybody. They're just not roughnecks. so
They're not. They're not. They're scientists. They are. Everything we've seen about Israel since the massacre of 10/7 demonstrates to me that they're in the club of actual superpowers, which includes China, Russia, the United States, and Israel. Nuclear powers capable of and having the will and ability to project force long distances. And they have shown that they are our best partner on the world stage. I think they're more reliable than our NATO allies. I don't know if that's a radical statement to you, but I just think Israel is a better ally than a lot of our NATO allies.
Well, I heard a wise comment the other day at a Hillsdale event. We don't want to be responsible for the well-being of Ukraine or Israel in detail.
Correct.
But you should pick your allies among people who, first of all, you pick allies of convenience, understanding that they may not last very long. You do that. But then if there's somebody who's disposed in a certain way, free country, pillar of Western civilization, and then here's the third thing, and able to patrol and help keep order in their region, that makes an ally, right? And that's what they do. It's a better world that Iran is weakened. It would be a much better world if its power were devoted to other ends and this evil that they do, right? And Israel has done the lion's share of that work, and in Syria, and Russia is weaker because of that. And China is all over the Middle East now. They're supporting Iran heavily, and the Israelis are finding Chinese weapon in the hands of Hamas in Gaza, and so they're up to every kind of mischief there. And it's a part of the world that affects us. And so if we can find an ally that can do mighty efforts in a good cause, then that's a valuable ally. And they are that.
A very difficult question, since you are married to a Brit and you love Great Britain. What has happened to what was our most reliable ally? The country is a wreck.
It's a thing to make your heart sick.
Yeah.
It does me. There are State Department warnings that I think are legitimate, that if you go to Britain today, you have to watch out for crime. It's severe in certain areas, most large areas, and you have to watch what you say because you can get arrested. And they and the European Union are in what they're adopting regulations about social media that will end up, if they're allowed to continue, and the Trump administration is resisting it, they will censor our social media. And therefore they'll be deciding what we can hear, too, as they are for their own people right now. And that's not healthy, right? That doesn't work. And it's a violation of fundamental rights. So, yeah, what kind of a craziness is it? I have family, my wife's family over there, and they're dear friends of mine. And I was in a conversation with some friends over there and family, and they said, well, it's very tricky to stop that immigration. And I said, Napoleon couldn't get here into this country, and Hitler couldn't get here. How tricky can it be?
Well, I remember when I mentioned Israel as a superpower, they have the will to use the power that they possess. That is always a function of international standing. If you have the will to deploy power, the United Kingdom seems paralyzed. And I'm not sure if it's because the Tories are collapsing, we have a minute left, or because reform is rising. Do you think that old Great Britain will reassert itself eventually?
Well, I was over there last summer and had some inspiring conversations with great people. And the situation is very bad. Electoral politics are changed by this immigration, right? And maybe they can't get out of it. But what I said at the end of that was, one, being here with you and hearing the tone of this 2-3 conferences I was involved in, I said, one thinks there's still a Britain, and he praises the Lord for it. So that's what I think.
That is great news. Stand by. I'll be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn as the Hillsdale Dialogue continues. Remember, all things Hillsdale found at hillsdale.edu. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest, president of Hillsdale College, which is back in school. Dr. Arnn, it was a grim week because of a shooting at a church and a church school, at Annunciation Church and School in Minneapolis. I was on the Hannity program last night. Sean invited me on with the great Victor Davis Hanson. So my number one job was not to get in Victor's way if he was saying something. But I wanted to say, and I got the opportunity to say, that the critics of prayer in the aftermath of tragedy are just not only not familiar with the Gospels, the Psalms, or Job, they don't know the American founding or Lincoln. And it seems to me that the American left has moved from secular absolutism, meaning that no religion in the public square, to actually a fundamental anti-religious hostility. So what do you think is driving the left to attack the people who pray as opposed to the people who look away?
Nihilism. There's a kind of one of the things that happens, when you don't believe in anything anymore, is that you begin to hate yourself. And so what they hate about us is the pillars of the West, civil and religious freedom, Christianity, which is, by the way, the religion that induces that, the principles of equality and freedom, the moral law as it's known in both reason and faith. Those are how a free country gets built and stays strong enough to defend itself and continue to be free. And they're enemies of all of that. I mean, the shooter in Minneapolis was a desperate man. I mean, they've taken down his YouTube video, his manifesto, so I haven't seen it, but I've read some accounts of it. And if it's true, and it probably is, because there's a lot of people saying it is, he was just a desperate and confused and lost young man. And there was a fair amount of self-hatred in there, which is what suicide is. I've been reading G.K. Chesterton some lately, and he says that suicide is in one way worse than murder because it's saying no to everything. It's murdering everybody and everything. And one's heart goes out to the terrible young man who killed those little kids, especially to the little kids. But then he killed himself, right? And that's because he hated himself.
Now, I did research as best I could over the last 72 hours that the Naval Postgraduate School Center for Homeland Defense and Security reports that we've had 118 active shooter incidents at K through 12 schools in 26 years. That's between 4 and 5. It excludes the university shootings like at Virginia Tech, but it begins with Columbine. It goes through this week. And 4 or 5 a year. That's a deep illness. And we don't have one study that tries to profile what it is. Trey Gowdy told me this week, young white men who are disassociated from everything that produces joy in their life. But that's too broad to be of any help to us. Are you surprised that we don't have any good data on these 118 incidents?
Well, I read I don't rather, except that I don't, one would have to generalize the question, right? What does it take to make not just a person who won't shoot other people? That's rare, although it's more common than it used to be. What does it take to produce a happy and healthy human being? And, that's the whole art of civilization, right? That's child rearing. That's everything. And so we're going wrong in that. I did read a long article about the Columbine shooters back in the day, and it was an excellent profile in it might have been in the New York Times Sunday magazine, but it's some big, long thing, right? And it was very good. And the point is, those were very troubled young men. And they were manifest that at school and at home, the way they dressed, the way they acted. Because, I work around young people, right? And just walk around and listen to their conversations as you pass by and look at their faces and their body language. If something's troubling them, you can usually tell, right?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of troubled kids, and I think that's a symptom of a very troubled society. And, we're going to have to, America, we have to recover ourselves. We have to recover our convictions. And to do that, we have to recover our understanding of those convictions.
I think
it's not enough just
a great deal that has to do with.
Anymore.
Yeah, I think a great deal that has to do with religious belief. And I know on the campus.
Well, that's
Hillsdale,
right. I mean, but see, God is a bad thing now, right? In the left, as you said, and that means you're giving up on everything. If you think God is a bad thing, the idea of it is a bad thing. That's devastating.
It is. It's terrible for the society. Do not go anywhere, America. Dr. Arnn and I will next turn to what the Democratic Party has going on inside of it, because that's madness as well. Stay tuned.
Hello, this is Jeremiah Regan, and I have some great news. We've brought Hillsdale's incredibly popular free online courses to the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. The Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast brings you our online courses in their entirety, with courses ranging from ancient history and biblical epics to foundational political principles and the future of American citizenship. Follow the Hillsdale College Online Courses podcast to hear new episodes every week with additional commentary and insights from our team. Go to podcast.hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. You know that because we use the same intros in the music every single program. Next week, we will return to Winston Churchill in the Second World War. I believe we're just going to be on Chapter 3 of The Gathering Storm. If you are behind and you want to catch up, they have made it very easy to find over at hillsdale.edu the first 3 episodes of this series, and I'm getting great feedback on it. Thank you all out there. Dr. Arnn is my guest, but we're actually looking at the immediate past as opposed to the past of 80 years ago. Dr. Arnn, the Democrats gathered for their first meeting since the election of the new chairman, Ken Martin, in January, and it was really their first substantive meeting, and it was in Minneapolis, and it began with a land acknowledgement. And I bring that up only because the land acknowledgement was explicit in its contempt for Western civilization and for the West and its colonialism, and without attempting to defend America's treatment of the Native Americans during the era of the frontier, it is nevertheless quite mad, in my view, to begin with a land acknowledgement when a party is in the wilderness trying to get away from woke. What do you think?
Well, it's very difficult to make sense of that whole land acknowledgement deal, right? Because, who got here first? The Europeans certainly got here after many of the Native Americans, who were not very numerous and who had apparently themselves come from somewhere else. And they had struggled over the territory among themselves for generations, right? And so the truth is, people have a right to live somewhere. And when the Europeans came to this new world, they brought with them a method of human organization that was bound to dominate the Native Americans. There were, there's a really great book one should read called The Children of the Summer Moon.
Oh, yes, you've sent me on that. That's a fabulous book.
Isn't it, though?
The Comanches.
The point is, you can't read that book without respecting the Comanche. They were fierce, right? But there were like 30,000 of them governing, living on, which really means roaming around, something like 20% of the United States of America. And that means when you went on that land, if you were a European settler, you wouldn't encounter them for a long time, right? Didn't know how many there were, didn't know they were there. And the point is that there were more of us, and we had a different principle of organization that let more people live of their own than they did.
And we had property rights. And I will never understand why Jefferson did not include life, liberty, and property, instead included life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because property rights is the basic civilizing commonality among the West, and it's what Leninists attacked first. And land acknowledgments are a repudiation of property rights, which is it's a weight-bearing wall of civilization. Do you know why Jefferson did not include property rights?
I do. The reason is it wasn't important. Many of the documents written at the same time, including some in which Jefferson colluded, did say property. Those were synonyms. And it was understood, that's what it meant, right? You have a right. If you have a right, see, your right to your property comes from your right to your life. Because, we have to eat every day. And if all we're allowed to do is earn the bread for just that day, then every day will be an emergency. And so we have to be able to store up value. And so Jefferson knew that argument inside and out and understood it very well. It wasn't turning away from property. It was an alternative formulation of the same thing.
All right, that makes sense to me. Now, a land acknowledgement is a repudiation of property rights and of the civilization that mapped and surveyed and cut out the meets and the bounds and created the 3,300 counties in the United States and the law. It's idiocy. And I think that the Democrats have fallen into, well, they've fallen off the left cliff. And I don't know how far they're going to fall before they hit the bottom, but it might be in New York City in November. What do you think? Because they're one of America's great political parties. We don't want it to do that. We want it to revive. We don't want it to collapse.
Well, I don't care. I think we're likely to have a two-party system. I believe with Winston Churchill about that. You need two parties, both gathered around different aspects of the central themes of the nation and contending for power and shifting as events and moods and opinions shift, but both gathered around the central ideas. And Churchill always thought it was dangerous. Like he spent his whole life, his whole adult life, attempting to eliminate the Socialist Party as a major force in British politics. And instead what happened was those wars happened, for which he's being blamed, but is not responsible. And the Socialists came in and beat him, right? And he regretted that, and he spoke very strongly against it, and he never stopped doing that. And so it was dangerous, he thought, to Britain, that the alternative to conservatism was socialism. It might be more dangerous today because it's not absolutely clear that there is any alternative to the craziness they got right now. But yeah, in other words, you need two strong parties, and you need an argument between them, and that helps keep everything honest, right? And if instead what you've got is this whipsaw where one party is for one kind of country entirely, and the other party is for another kind, that's like pre-Civil War, right? One party, a house divided against itself, cannot stand. It's going to become one thing or the other. And you know, those two things are incompatible. They can't continue. They can't cooperate because they differ so sharply, and they can't, in government, they can't cooperate because you can't have a community of people serving different ends.
No, and I certainly hope.
It's a dangerous situation.
Yeah, I hope we don't go there. We certainly have some of the indices of the late 1960s, early 1970s engulfing us, but hopefully that will fade and Democrats will regain their balance. They might be wrong. I don't want them to be rotten. I'll be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn, the Hillsdale Dialogue final segment. And then reminder, on Monday, it's a Labor Day special. Do not miss it if you want to know the history of the American labor movement, the real history. Don't miss that Hillsdale Dialogue 3-hour special. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, the Hillsdale Dialogue. This week, we are looking back at some recent events, but I want to conclude this week by asking Dr. Arnn about his freshmen. Because when freshmen arrive on a college campus, any kind of college campus, if they're not commuting, and sometimes even if they're commuting, they're struck usually with a sense of wonder and panic. And I wonder, Dr. Arnn, do you love that, or do you have to work too hard to notice it?
No, this is my favorite thing. I'm halfway through my favorite 2 weeks of the year. Last week we were getting ready for them to show up, and this week they're here. And I've been able to have lunch in the dining hall 3 times in a row, and it's just delightful. And they're, they you can tell the freshmen they wiggle when you talk to them. And I gave them a big honor code talk on Monday, full of threats. Then they had to sign the honor code or go home, and it's delightful. They come over on Monday night. They come over to our house. About 400 of them. For ice cream social. And I introduce the faculty to them. They come, right? We're standing around my back garden, and I call out the faculty and tell funny stories about them. And the freshmen are just eager. And, if you come to this college, it's kind of a crazy thing to do, right? Because you have to sign the honor code, and you're told that it's difficult.
You have to work real hard.
Yeah, you get in here with a 3.95, and if form holds this term, the freshman grade point average will be 2.85, and that's shock and awe. And they know that. They're told that in the recruiting process. And so they've chosen that, and that means that they anticipate difficulty. And remember, if you graduate from high school with a 3.95, that has a very great deal to do with your self-esteem, with what you think of yourself, right? I'm one of the really smart ones, right? Well, then get a whole crowd of them together, and then now you're going to do something harder, right? And the ones who fight their way in here are the ones who are up for that challenge. And
I just think it's magnificent because it's a combination of enthusiasm and fear that and bewilderment. You know, they don't know what to take. I don't know that there's a lot of option in the freshman year at Hillsdale, but I do want to encourage everyone who's listening today. You want to go get the application now and start thinking about Hillsdale now. If you've been listening to these dialogues for years, and it turns out a lot of young people do, then you don't want to wait until November and December to file, though there's deadlines then. You want to go and get it from hillsdale.edu. And you want to see all the great online courses that are there available for you. You might want to watch Dr. Arnn's podcast, the Dr. Arnn podcast, go back through the Hillsdale Dialogues. Just get ready for college because you're a senior in high school, and pretty soon the world comes to meet you at the door and challenge you. And you got 1 year left to get ready for that. Dr. Larry Arnn, thank you. On Monday, we will be having the annual Hillsdale Dialogue special on the American labor movement on this Labor Day. Have a great long weekend and enjoy that program on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.